Welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Bew. Peter is a software engineer and is a lead developer at GoodBlock. Peter was also a member of the Telos launch group. We all know Peter from the day one. Peter is going to introduce us to Telos Decide. Now, Telos Decide was previously the Trails, and he has extensive experience with this. Telos Decide comprises both voting and management of elected positions and committees. It's one of the innovations on Telos, and we are very glad to have you here, Peter. We are excited to hear about Telos Decide.
Oh, thanks for having me. Should we jump right in? Hello, this is a talk on Telos Decide. My name is Peter Bew. Just a little bit about myself here. I have been working in software for 10 years on various systems from web applications to video games to mobile applications. And as far as Telos is concerned, I was part of the Telos launch group, like Michael said. I was the development team lead, which basically means that I was just helping people decide what they should do. I am currently a core developer, which entails updating the system contracts or taking upstream merges or doing whatever is required to keep the Telos blockchain running error-free so that everyone can use it. And currently I'm employed as software engineer at GoodBlock. GoodBlock, one of the founding members of Telos. We've been working very hard to bring as many features to Telos as possible. We're currently working on dStore, which we're going to hear about later, a decentralized storage solution. And we are one of the largest contributors to Trail specifically, or Decide. And if you have any questions, here's my info, peter@goodblock.io or Telegram @PeterBew. If you have any questions about what we're going to be discussing today, you feel free to message me or email me at either one of those places, and I will be sure to give you whatever help and assistance I can provide. So what is Telos Decide? In the words of its designer, Craig Branscombe, who is not here, unfortunately, Telos Decide is an on-chain governance engine exclusively for the Telos blockchain network and offers an extensive suite of voting services and DAC/DAO tools for both users and developers. Wow, that is a mouthful. I think when most people read the documentation, they're probably going to be confused. So we're going to start with the most basic components and then hopefully work up from there. I know I only have a brief amount of time talking to you guys, so hopefully I can get all this information out there. So I think the best way to describe what Decide is by discussing what it does or what it provides. So this is kind of the basic structure of Decide. We have groups, we have tokens, and we have ballots, and we have committees. So at the core level, a group is just a representation of a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. There are many examples of decentralized autonomous organizations. The block producers of Telos can be defined as a decentralized autonomous organization. And that is just an organization that is governing itself in a decentralized manner. Usually these DAOs are on blockchains and they have contracts which allow them to vote and give members of that DAO special privileges over funds, over contract actions, over setting up events like this. Another good example would be the Telos Foundation. The Telos Foundation is voted into power in a decentralized manner. They have seats of governance and those seats have responsibilities. And this can all be defined in a group. A group defines a token which allows members to stake, trade, and vote within that group. So that doesn't sound all that different from just a normal token, minus the voting bit. But what we've done is we've allowed groups to define a maximum supply and a supply just like any token. But they also have a degree of settings which define how a user can use the token. Can they transfer them? Can they stake them? Can they vote them? Can they vote with them? And how can they vote with them? And we'll get into a little bit of that later. And then ballots. Ballots are probably the core object of the Decide contract, and ballots are very simple struct that allow people to vote on any issue. The issue is usually going to be centered around the group itself. So if we have the Telos Foundation group, a ballot might be voting a specific committee member onto the committee, what that position is and what responsibilities it has. This allows members to vote on that ballot to elect that new committee member. And these ballots can be representations of any decision that needs to be made. There is a lot more. I kind of left out committees here, but I'll talk about that briefly. Committees are just like the Telos Foundation itself. They're just a digital representation of seats and seats of responsibility. We have tried to set up Decide in a way where a group can create a ballot that votes committee members onto a committee board. And we've set up a system by which those committee members can have a particular set of powers and use those powers for the good of the group. I think we should just talk about like what Decide is from a different abstract level, why we made it, and what role it plays in Telos blockchain voting. I think the best way to start is just by talking about why we decided to make it in the first place. So originally, when Telos was going to launch, we decided that Telos's goal was to empower users, and our vision was to let users determine the destiny of Telos. And we decided to create 3 core contracts to live out that vision. The first was the works contract, the second amend, and the third arbitration. All of these contracts required voting. The works contract allowed people to create proposals for work and then have the Telos blockchain community decide, pun, whether or not that person would be paid for that work and whether or not that work was important. So in that case, we needed users to vote on proposals to award money to another user who was interested in doing work. The second contract was amend. Amend was our more the core of Telos governance, in that amend holds the sharded constitution, the TBNOA, the Telos Blockchain Network Agreement. I can never remember this acronym, I'm sorry. But these documents that exist on amend can be ratified or amended with a proposal. So the proposal in this contract's case is to amend the current agreement that all users agree to when they create an account on the network, basically the EULA for our blockchain. And so we needed rules for that contract as well. And then we had the arbitration contract, which allowed users to file disputes with a decentralized court of appeals, basically, where they could go, okay, well, my money was taken and I need action. Please come in here and vote for these arbitrators so that I know that there's someone there to listen and to and solve my problems. Each of these contracts required a voting system, but each contract had its own concerns, its own requirements. We quickly discovered that implementing these contracts, we had repeat code. Quite often, there was the same code in all 3 contracts identically. So we discovered that there was just an inefficient use of code and an inefficient use of memory. If I was to vote on one contract and then vote on another, we would have duplication of memory on both contracts. So Craig had the brilliant idea to implement a single abstract voting contract that all 3 of the core contracts would use. Of course, that meant we had to make a 4th core contract, and it created more work for us. But we didn't really know how big of an endeavor it was going to be when we started. We started working on implementing version 1 of, at the time, it was called eosio.trail. And after 2,000 lines of contract code and 3,000 lines of testing code, we had ourselves a fairly abstract voting contract that would allow other contracts to create their own groups and vote on those and respond to votes. This allows for all of the core contracts in Telos to operate. When a ballot ends, the works contract can determine whether or not that person can be paid based off of the results of the ballot and then issue money. And because of this relationship between the Decide contract and the Works contract, we were able to create an ecosystem for other dApps to create their own contracts and create their own ecosystems. So what's the difference? The difference that this contract makes over other forms of voting systems like the block producer voting. Block producer voting is specific to block producers and isn't usable by any other dApps. There might be ways to. What can dApps do with Decide? As we previously discussed, they can create their own tokens. Those tokens are transferable, stakeable, and votable. They can, once they've created their token, they can engage their users by empowering them, giving them vested interest in their dApp. Once giving them powers beyond the monetary, the token would allow them to vote on issues that the group is focused on. So if we created an environmental group for a local town, the token could be just called green, and the number of green tokens could be awarded based off of the amount of work you're doing in your local environment and in your town to promote environmentally friendly practices. And then you could use those tokens to get the users invested, to allow them to create ballots and vote on important issues. So back to my example, if we have the green token, and there is a new recycling project coming up in your local community, you could use your green token and your weight, the amount of work that you've done to try and improve the environment of your local community, and you could vote on those important issues and hopefully get them to pass based off of your experience, based off of the weight of your work. And in that way, it can also be used as a somewhat similar to a reputation system. DApp groups can form committees. So back to that same example, if I had a local community, a local environmental community, and I wanted to create a committee of people to focus on important issues like recycling paper or improving the waste management system of my community, or if water is a concern, perhaps I have a committee member for that. So once they have formed these committees, we can give that committee a great deal of latitude for creating and controlling new works, new development, new engagements. Additionally, it allows responses. So if I'm creating my own smart contract that uses Decide, and a user creates a ballot, I can have my contract respond to the creation of that ballot. I can have my contract respond to the ending of that ballot. So if the ballot, for example, was to decide whether or not to add a particular item to my recycling bin, to the recycling waste management system, I could create a ballot for that, yes or no, as the options. And if I had a prevailing number of yeses and the ballot ends, my contract can respond to the end of that ballot and can respond to the results of that ballot. So if the response to the end of that ballot was to transfer funds to a particular account so that project can use those funds to enact the will of your smart contract, then that would be my response. Contracts can also respond to the addition of committee members. So if I was to vote on the addition of a new committee member and the ballot were to end, then I could add that member to my committee in Decide. Additionally, I could add additional latitude, additional permissions inside my smart contract to that committee member. There is a great deal of extensibility in Decide, and we'll go over a couple of examples here shortly to give you a better idea of what can be done. So I think another good thing to do here would be to walk through the documentation. Craig has done us a great favor and made a very large set of README files for Decide, which I already have open here. So you can find the Telos Decide project at Telos Network /Telos Decide on GitHub. It's all public, including the contract. So you're welcome to come in here and look at the Decide contract, which is quite large. But here in the documentation, you can see where I stole my opening line about what Craig says about Telos Decide. Additionally, we have some listing of some features. So this goes on and on. So we have secure ballot hosting, advanced voting methods. So the advanced voting methods in this case, Craig has actually created a configurable ballot. So you can have one account, one vote. You can have one token, one vote. You can have quadratic voting. He's created a plethora of different voting methods that can be applied to any ballot, and those are configurable on a ballot by ballot basis. Custom tokens and treasuries. Treasuries is just the internal name for a group. So we still have all of the same abilities that a normal EOSIO.token token has, but in this case, they are controlled by Decide. Committee management and tools, traceable voting integrity. We spent a great deal of time when designing the original trail and when Craig was redesigning to 2.0 for Decide on how to properly trace votes, how to check that the integrity of a ballot is being maintained. And that goes into this system where when a user has voted and they go through and they change their stake or they transfer some of their liquid to another user, that changes their vote weight on all past votes that they've made, all open votes that they've made in the past. So he created a rebalancing system, which is a system whereby a user can go back and rebalance their vote if they have changed their stake in any way. Payroll system, which is actually just a clever way of paying people that do the rebalancing work. So GoodBlock has actually created an application that will go back and rebalance your votes automatically if voters change their vote stake for whatever reason. Optional light ballots, which is just a system where a smart contract or dApp can do their own vote accounting rather than having the vote accounting being done by Decide automatically. It can be done by you. There are some cases where, for example, the voting method that we've designed, advanced voting methods we designed to Decide, may not fit your need. So instead, you can create a light ballot and create your own way of calculating vote stake. Profitable worker service. This is where the payroll system is paying the worker for the vote integrity. We have a couple of sub documentation here. I would strongly recommend using the starter guide. Craig has gone through great lengths to describe trail or Decide as best as possible. So you can start with a starting guide to just get an idea of the hierarchy. And then we also have the voter and treasury guide. If you're starting your own smart contract, I'd highly recommend looking at the treasury guide, which is an explanation on what a treasury is, how to set one up, how to manage it, and all of the fields of the treasury. Here you can see the block of treasury settings, whether or not a token is transferable, burnable, reclaimable, stakeable, unstakeable, or mutable, max mutable. So all of these settings allow you to create a very verbose token that can be transferable or non-transferable. You could use the system to represent something, a non-digital asset or a fungible asset, a non-fungible asset, excuse me. So there's quite a bit of extensibility within the treasury system. And all these things can be found here at the documentation. I don't want to spend too long here, so we'll move on to the example. I'll just go ahead and use the here we are, the works example. So this is the Telos works contract, and the Telos works contract is the second version of EOSIO.savings, which allows users to create proposals that are saved as PDFs on IPFS, then distributed through a ballot to the user base so that they can be voted on. And it's just a yes, no, pass, fail kind of proposal. And if the proposal passes, that user gets paid for the prospective work that they have said that they were going to do or that they have already done. So in here, just in the basic design, we have just a proposal. The proposal has a status, either being drafted, in progress, failed, canceled, or complete. And then we have milestones, which is just a way of saying have I voted on this? Has it passed? Has it failed? Or has it been paid? So we just have some basic actions. We're just looking at the header of this specific contract just to see how easy it is to create a proposal and integrate with Decide. We have the works contract. This is allowing us to create a draft proposal, and you're just providing the information required to create said proposal within the context of works. So within the context of works, we just need to know what kind of work is being done and how much money you would like for the work that's being done. So we have our, we just have the title, the description, and the content, which are just going to be the metadata about the work being done. And then we have the proposer, the person that's making the proposal, category, which could be anything, and total requested, which is the asset, the amount that they would like to receive after they successfully have done work. And then milestones. This is just a set of percentages for payouts at different periods over a certain amount of time. Once you've created your proposal, you can launch the proposal, and this is calling start basically open voting on Decide. And once voting is open, then users can start casting their votes on Decide and making some progress on this proposal for yes or no. At the end of the proposal, once the results have been posted, this contract can respond to that broadcast. So right here we have the EOSIO on notify Telos.decide broadcast. So this is an action, an inline action being called by Decide when a ballot closes. So in this case, we can register this function to do something when the ballot has closed. And in that way, we can create this relationship between those two contracts. So this example just kind of shows the power of Decide. I don't want to go too far into the implementation because I just don't have enough time, and I've wasted a lot of it apparently being muted. So the things to take away from Decide though are that you can quickly and easily set up a contract. So I'm just going to go quickly over this little task list that I have set up. And this is just the basic broad strokes since there's really not enough time to go through a demo. So we just need to decide what your group does inside of Decide. So decide what your group does, puns, quotes. What can voters decide? What powers do they have? What choices, what do ballots represent? What choices do they make? In the context of works, the only thing a ballot is used for is to determine, to create a proposal and determine whether or not a person is to be paid. But a ballot can represent anything. So in your contract, you just need to decide what decisions need to be made and how much power your voters or your users have. So first you'll create your group and you'll create your token supply. Oh Lord, there we go. You'll create your token supply and you'll create your group settings, which is again whether or not your token is transferable, whether or not it's stakeable, and how can they vote with it. Do they vote with their liquid? Do they vote with their stake? Do they vote with both? And that's all within the group settings. You create a ballot. When a user requests to create a ballot, you create a ballot. You set the end time. Are you going to allow users to vote over a period of 5 days, over a period of 10 days, or over a period of 30 days? It's completely up to you. When that ballot ends, you respond to that ballot. And again, that is just catching the broadcast from Telos Decide and deciding what to do with it. At the end of that ballot, is it a proposal that you need to pay money? Is it voting in a committee member? Is it deciding to upgrade your contract to a different version? You can have your own decentralized form of governments, and that governments can take any shape. And done. And that's all that you need to do as far as the checklist is concerned. There is probably more implementation in your contract responding to these ballots than there will be working with Decide. You're just making these inline actions, and there's 5 or 6 inline actions that need to be performed in order for your contract to operate correctly. I already did that. And so Finn, yay.
Well, thank you, Peter. That was a excellent overview of Telos Decide. Now,
minus all the muting though, right?
no,
Minus the muting.
okay. Is anyone using this, Peter? As far as you know, is anyone using Telos Decide?
Yeah, there's a couple. Well, besides the Telos core contracts, there's the TFVT, there's Seeds. We've had a variety of other dApps approach us about integrating Decide, but those are the only ones that I can talk about at the moment that I believe.
Now, how difficult is it to integrate into a new project? For example, if someone wants to create a DAC or something like that, want to have some officers selected and ballots and all this, right? Now, how difficult is it? Is it fairly easy, or you need?
Well, of course, if you're doing that, you're going to need to have some contract development experience. But if you are already a contract developer, it's going to be very easy. Craig has provided that documentation to make it as easy as possible. Or there you go. Seeds tells us that Telos Decide system saved them a year of development, which is true because it's about how long we spent on developing it. So,
Oh, I didn't know that it's so much comprehensive. 2,000 lines of code. That's a lot of work.
it was. Craig did the initial implementation, and then I went through and wrote the testing code, which I thought would be easier. But as I wrote the testing code, I quickly eclipsed the amount of contract lines by the amount of testing lines. Go ahead.
No, another question I had is anonymous voting. Now, sometimes it's useful to have anonymous voting, right? Just especially if you are doing an election for the DAC member, for example. Maybe
right.
Everybody in a DAC, and you don't want to know who you didn't vote for, or you don't want to make your preference now. So is there some plans for introducing anonymous voting?
So that goes back to that concept of a light ballot. So if Decide doesn't natively support the voting method that you would prefer for your organization, you can have your contract create a light ballot. When the voting ends on the light ballot, the broadcast is still made, so your contract can still respond to the end of that ballot. But you would have another system, your own contract or an off-chain oracle do the accounting for you. So you could create a front end and a system that is anonymized, but Decide doesn't natively support anonymized voting.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Peter. We are very grateful that you took the time and effort to be part of this event, and it was
absolutely.
very useful for us.
Thank you. I apologize for the technical issues. That's very embarrassing.
It's okay. Thank you, Peter.
Yes, thank you.